Hey guys, yeah, I'm sorry I've not been around. Life's been a bit hectic last couple of months, so as promised, what I'm going to do is I've got myself a new unit in, as you can see here, which is bigger than the old unit, and by chance the old unit is over there with the rest of my DVD collection, which you can see. And obviously I've got some Who memorabilia up there, as you can see. And yeah, I am a bit of a Trekkie as well, and I'm a big Star Wars fan, so say no more. But anyway, that detracts from what I'm videoing here. So yeah, I've got this big unit, and excuse the models on the top, that's to do with my other channel, Stuart Scale Models. But yeah, I thought what I'd do is run through my collection, and so that you see what I've got up to date, as it were, as regards figures, DVDs, and obviously the Big Finish collection I've got in amongst them, and they are virtually all in chronological order from the first Doctor up to the 15th. So without further ado, we're going to go and run through all the figures here. In the background there I've got some photos. So yep. Obviously I've got my favourite Doctor here, which was the third Doctor, Jon Pertwee, and he is the Doctor that I remember the earliest, believe it or not, when I was a kid. Um, he was always my favourite Doctor, and he still is, to be honest with you. And then obviously I've got the fifth Doctor figure there, and behind him, or just in front of him, I've got the seventh Doctor, and then obviously Paul McGann's eighth Doctor from the movie. I've still got three more to collect of the classic Doctors. Obviously the first, William Hartnell, second, Pat Troughton, and the fourth, Tom Baker. And here we've almost got the modern Doctors, bar one. I've obviously got the War Doctor, John Hurt, ninth Doctor, Chris Eccleston, Rose, Billy Piper, 10th Doctor, David Tennant, and obviously the 11th Doctor, Matt Smith. Yes, make sure you got plenty of fish fingers and custard. And obviously the one that's missing is the 12th, which I'm hoping to get a figure of soon. And then we've got Jodie Whittaker as the 13th. Obviously we haven't got the David Tennant 14th Doctor. And then obviously we've got Ruby Sunday and the 15th Doctor with the working TARDIS here. And in the back we've got little bust of a Cyberman with the history of the Cybermen, and the 15th Doctor's sonic screwdriver, along with the Doctor's pennant watch as well. And then we're going to run into the actual DVD collection. So we're starting off with obviously the Unearthly Child, which was first broadcast on the 23rd of November 1963, the day after President Kennedy's assassination. And then we went on to the original Dalek story, which you've got there, which was the second story. What was the next one? The next one was a very this is actually made up of audio and stills, and it was done for Ivan, Marco Polo. But rumours have it that they may well be doing this into an animated story soon. Let's just hope so. And following on for that, we had a two-parter in the TARDIS of all the crew, The Edge of Destruction. And following that, we had the six-part story, The Keys of Marinus. That's a pretty good one, actually, I have to say, William Hartnell's. And another historical one, The Aztecs. That's not a bad story either. That's also a six-parter, I think. The Sensorites. Not one of his best, I would say. Reign of Terror. Now, that's all about the French Revolution, obviously. So it's another historical one. Planet of the Giants, which is where they ended up miniaturized. That was a very clever story, I have to say. And then the second Dalek story, which is a classic, which is the Dalek invasion of Earth, and obviously it marks the departure of first of the original TARDIS crew, Susan. Next one is the Rescue, which I think is when... Hang on, let me have a look at it. Dido oh, it's not Dido. It's on the planet Dido, and they come across Vicky. It's played by... Oh, I've forgotten her name now. And then the next one was where they were in Rome, which is all about Nero, etc. That's quite a strong story. And this one's a bit of a weak one, I have to say, the Web Planet. Yeah. I wouldn't say it was one of my favourites. This is a pretty good one, The Crusade. And there is some actual animated footage in it, because obviously I think there was 1 or 2 episodes that were missing, or it was fully restored by the time this came out. Space Museum is a fairly good one as well. And then obviously we've got The Chase, where Peter Purves actually comes into this as well. He makes his first appearance on the show, and obviously later he comes in as Stephen. And it also marks the departure of Ian and Barbara as well at the end of the episode. So there's a bit of... it leaves with Doctor with just Vicky. There you go! What? And then this is a very good classic episode, The Time Meddler, which features Peter Bottomley. Although the character has been brought back, I think on one of the Big Finish audios by another actor. Galaxy 4, which is this one was again used with stills and what footage was left there, although it's since come out as an animated adventure, so I might get that. Mission to the Unknown, which is the precursor to one of the most well-known and longest episodes, the Daleks' Master Plan. And obviously this marks the departure of Vicky, the Mythmakers. And then obviously we're coming into the 12-parter, the Daleks' Master Plan. That is a classic episode. Rumour has it they may have found the missing episodes, so it might be fully restored, but we shall see. Following that, you got the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, which I think is... I'm not sure. I think it... No. It's where I think Dodo comes into it, I think. Is it? Or am I right? No, it's not. No. I think it's the next one, the Ark. Where Dodo's in it. I think Dodo actually... No, she comes into this, I think. I think if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, this is where Dodo comes in. And then obviously you've got the Ark, which again, that's another 6-parter. Not a bad story. This is a classic, which actually, again on this one, it's just photo stills and remaining episodes. Used up with some of the soundtrack. Although this one has been illustrated and brought back again, which I may well get hold of. Then we've got the Gunfighters. That's a classic one, well known. That's where the Doctor ends up getting a toothache and they're trying to find him a dentist back in the Midwest. This is a good one, the Savages. I think this is where Stephen leaves them at the end of the episode. And then obviously we've got the departure of Dodo in the War Machines. So and then it introduces his last companions, the Doctor's last companions, which are, if I can find it on here, Polly and Ben. So yeah, and then it's the penultimate episode with Polly and Ben of the Smugglers, and then we've got the 10th planet, which obviously we find that the Doctor has a way of cheating death by regenerating, and this was the first regeneration. because obviously William Hartnell was well enough to carry on with the role, and they decided to replace him, obviously, with Pat Troughton. So yeah, this is actually an adventure in space and time, which is one that I think came out on the 50th anniversary, which is all about the start of Doctor Who and William Hartnell's reign, as played by oh god, hang on, I've forgotten the guy's name now. Sorry, I do apologise. And then obviously we've got the movie collection, which came out the same year that William Hartnell departed. In fact, that was the year I was born, 1966. Which are the two Dalek movies. It's the Daleks, which is a readaptation of the first Dalek story, and the Daleks' Invasion of Earth, which is obviously a readaptation of the William Hartnell episode. This is a very good story for the first story of Pat Troughton's era, which features his well-known adversary, the Daleks. So this is one of the illustrated stories, which was overdone by the actual soundtrack from the original series. This is another one which I've got bits of footage as well as remaining episodes, the Highlanders, where Jamie McCrimmon comes into the fray. This one has since been illustrated as well, which I'll probably get another copy of, the Underwater Menace. Not one of these best episodes, I have to say. This is a classic, obviously with a re-augmented Cybermen Moonbase. And this is a classic one, the Macra Terror, as well, which features, hang on, the Macra. That's why again, this is an illustrated one, so we'll go through that. This is where Ben and Polly leave the Doctor, the faceless ones. So it's just Jamie and the Doctor. And this introduces Victoria in The Evil of the Daleks. Again, this is an animated series with the original soundtrack. Next one is a well-known classic one, The Tomb of the Cybermen. I must admit, this is one of my favourite episodes of the Pat Troughton era. And also another illustrated one, another classic, The Abominable Snowman. Sorry about shaky camera work, I'm just trying to hold this by a camera hand. And then the next one introduces the Ice Warriors. There you go. After that, you've got a well-known classic, and this is a good story, The Enemy of the World, where Pat Troughton actually played not only the Doctor, but his alter ego. What's his name? Salamander. So yeah, that's a good story. Another one which reintroduces, obviously, Abominable Snowman, The Web of Fear, which is all based on the Underground. And I think that was the first one where you had Alistair Lethbridge Stewart come into the fray. He was only a Colonel, Lethbridge Stewart, then. Or was it Major Lethbridge Stewart? Fury from the Deep, that's another one. That's a fantastic one. Another illustrated one with the original soundtrack. Wheel of Space. Yeah, I think the Fury from the Deep actually marks the departure of Victoria. And it's quite an emotional departure for Jamie. And then obviously we've got the Wheel in Space, which introduces Zoe. Because this is coming to Pat Troughton's last season as the Doctor. Following that, you've got a very well-known episode, The Dominators. This is a very good story, The Mind Robber. Next is a well-known classic story. This is a six-parter, The Invasion of the Cybermen. Brilliant story, that one. Very much a unit-based story on that one. The Crotons. I didn't rate this one, to be honest with you. Seeds of Death, that's a good one, bringing back the Ice Warriors again. Then you've got the Space Pirates. Not bad. As a penultimate adventure. And then obviously the very final one, the 8-part adventure, the War Games, where he's actually ends up having to call in the Time Lords, and because he's committed certain crimes, he's forced into another regeneration at the end of it, and Zoe and Jamie make their departure and their minds are wiped. So there you go. However, Big Finish have done a series of adventures featuring the second Doctor leading up to his regeneration, so I might start collecting them soon. Anyway, this is the start of the era from my favourite Doctor, where he ends up landing in the TARDIS on Earth, obviously newly regenerated, and it gets reintroduced into UNIT, because obviously after this it's going to be a UNIT focused era with Colonel Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart and all the guys, Liz Shaw, and obviously my favourite Doctor, Jon Pertwee. Following on from that is the first introduction of the Silurians. There you go. It's called Doctor Who and the Silurians for some reason. The Ambassadors of Death, that's a classic episode as well. Inferno, which rounds off Jon Pertwee's first season as the Doctor, and the final appearance of Liz Shaw. So again, I am collecting, believe it or not, some of the Big Finish stories which I've actually done by Tim Treloar and the guys. So I've listened to the first one, very good, but I'll tell you more about that in a moment. Anyway, next one introduces the Master, as in the form of Roger Delgado, and I have to say, out of all the Masters, he's my favourite. He had that amiable charm, but ruthlessness as well, and it was a constant battle between the third Doctor and him, and obviously introduces his assistant Jo Grant. Mind of Evil, that's a good one as well, where he's supposed to be manipulated by the Master, because there's a think tank or something or other, but it's a good story, another strong story. Claws of Axos, I can't say I rated this one much, it went on a bit too much, to be honest with you. Colony in Space, that's a good one. It's not one I'd seen before, but it's a good one. And this one rounds up the second season of Jon Pertwee with a well-known story, The Daemons against the Master in a little village, and that is a classic, absolute classic, that one. Right, leading on, we're going down to the second shelf. We've got Day of the Daleks. That is a classic as well. Again, very much a unit-based story. Curse of Peladon, this is one that's sort of slightly off-world. He's sent on there via the Time Lords to, I think, stop a crisis between two factions on the planet of Peladon, between the newly elected king, etc., as played by Patrick Troughton's son. And this is one I do remember as a kid, the Sea Devils. In fact, it's the first adventure I actually think back to watching, and I was hiding behind the couch along with my brother when this was on. And then we've got the Mutants. That's a very strong story as well, I have to say. And you've got the Time Monster. That's all about the Greek gods, etc. And that's a very good one, and Atlantis. And then, as I was saying, Big Finish have brought out a series of Third Doctor adventures. This is obviously featuring Jo Grant, as played by Katie Manning, where she's emulating a very young self. But Tim Treloar's interpretation of John's Doctor, blimey, I have to say, is brilliant. And obviously you've got the guy who played, hang on, what's his name? Mike Yates as well, he's in it. And I've only just started listening to the second edition of this, and that's a very strong story, a slightly off-world. Again, he's sent on the mission by the Time Lords. And then coming on to it, we've got a box set, Dalek War, And that features Frontier in Space, which was the very last appearance of Roger Delgado, sadly, as the Master, because about 6 months later he was tragically killed in a car accident in a taxi in Greece. And then following on from that, you got a classic Dalek story, The Planet of the Daleks. That is brilliant. And this was the first multi-Doctor story, because obviously it was celebrating the 10th anniversary of Doctor Who. So you had William Hartnell, Pat Troughton, as well as the current incumbent, Jon Pertwee there. It is quite a strong story, and it was very well done, I have to say. And this is a classic, I remember, The Carnival of Monsters with the Drashigs. Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And this was the final one with Jo Grant, where she ends up meeting her future husband. And it's against the giant maggots. That's a brilliant one, that one. That's a classic of the Jon Pertwee era. This, again, is another one I just recently got in. Sorry, that was my tablet. Return of Jo Jones, where he reunites up with his assistant Katie, Jo Grant, as played by Katie Manning. And then they've got a follow-on, The Quintessence. I'm not sure what they're like, but I'll probably do a slight review on those at some stage. Next one up is where he meets his final companion in the Doctor's era. That's oh god, blimey, my brain is not working. Sarah Jane Smith, that's it. Where scientists keep missing, etc. So yeah, it's a classic, that one. And then following on from that, you've got the Invasion of the Dinosaurs. It was a bit of a weak story, I thought. Death to the Daleks. That is a brilliant one, that one. Very well done. All about the 7 wonders of the universe. And this is a good one. The Monster of Peladon, where he returns to Peladon 20 years later after the events of the original story. And then his final one, which he went out with on a bang, was The Planet of the Spiders. And that's the last time I actually watched Doctor Who, because I thought to myself, it's not when Jon Pertwee's face disappeared and it reappeared into the disguise of Tom Baker, I stopped watching it because my favourite Doctor was gone. However, years later I caught up with it again. Anyway, following on from that, you had Tom's quintessential appearance in Robots, and he did make a bang with that one. I must admit, he really made his mark with that. Next one is The Ark in Space, where you come across what was their names? The Wern, yeah, that was it. And they have actually done a follow-up in the 8th Doctor Adventures of that. The next one was a well-known one. It was only a 2-parter, The Sontaran Experiment, which was made on the... I can't remember where it was filmed, but it was quite bleak. And then a well-known classic and the favourite Doctor story of all time, Genesis of the Daleks, which first introduced Davros in the guise of Michael Fisher. Brilliant story. Following on from that, you got The Revenge of the Cybermen, which was the last appearance for around about 15 years of the Cybermen. Terror of the Zygons, which was the final one of Tom Baker's first season as the Doctor, and the departure of Harry Sullivan as well. Then it was a spate of adventures with him and Sarah Jane Smith. Good season. It was quite a gothic season as well. Starting off with The Pyramids of Mars. That is a classic as well, where he comes across Sutekh, which he will encounter in his 15th incarnation. Following on from that, we get The Androids of Tara. That's a very good story, quite strong. And then following that, The Brain of Morbius. A little bit sort of related to Frankenstein in a way, but a good classic all the same. Seeds of Doom, that's another good one. The Mask of Mandragora, that is a very good story. And then finally, his departure with Sarah Jane Smith. Sorry, I'm getting a bit tongue-tied. The Hand of Fear. Again, a very good story. And then he did a solo one where you've got a very deteriorated master at the end of his 12th regeneration in The Deadly Assassin on Gallifrey. Following on from that, you got his first appearance with Leela, or as he referred to him, Savage, in The Face of Evil. And then a well-known classic, The Robots of Death, with the late, great Pamela Salem in it. And then another great one, which was set in Victorian England, The Talons of Weng-Chiang. And this is a damn good story. If anybody hasn't watched this, it's like a sort of the fog syndrome, if you know what I mean. But it comes up against the what is it? The Sontaran's mortal enemy, the Rutons, the horror Fang Rock. Following on from that, you've got the Invisible Enemy, which introduces one of the well-known dog K9. On from that, you've got the Image of Fendel. That is a fantastic story during Tom's era. And another one, I have to say, was not bad. The character that you've got there, very good, very well played. Yeah, he's like a money-grabbing little oik. The Sunmakers. And then you've got Underworld. Not bad, not bad. And finally, when he makes his Leela makes her departure and decides to stay on Gallifrey with Aldred, is The Invasion of Time. That's a good one. And then obviously we're coming into the Key of Time. And that's when he's first introduced to the first incarnation of Romana, as played by Mary Tamm. Obviously we've got the Rebos operation, the Pirate Planet. Yes, Mr. Fibberly! Stones of Blood, I like that one, that's a favourite of mine. Androids of Tara, where Mary Tamm plays two parts in that. The Power of Kroll. And then finally, obviously, we've got the Armageddon Thatcher, which introduces the future Romana in it as well. And then it obviously marks the last appearance of Mary Tamm as Romana. Following on from that, we've got a regenerated Romana in the form of Lalla Ward, who was playing another part in the previous adventure, Destiny of the Daleks, which I do remember. And that's when I actually started watching Doctor Who again, believe it or not. And then following on from that one, that was actually filmed in the whole of Paris, the City of Death, with the Skaloth. Creature from the Pit, I have to say, the monster in that, oh my god. Is that a big wobbly blob? Yeah, not one of the best. Nightmare of Eden, that's a good story. That's a very good story. Horns of Nimon, yet again, a very good story. And then obviously this one never originally got aired, which is Sharda, which would have been the finale of that season. And then following on for that, we have Tom Baker's final season as the 4th Doctor. I've had new titles, etc., called The Leisure Hive with the Pharmacy. That's quite a good story. Meglos, where you've got an alien that actually keeps taking the form of people, and obviously that was the appearance of a former companion, which you can see there as well. Following that, we got Full Circle, which introduces Adric. The State of Decay with the vampires, that's a good one. And then obviously this is all the space trilogy. And then the final one, which is the Warrior's Gate, which sees the departure of Lalla Ward as Romana. And you were the finest Romana of them all. And then obviously we had a one-off spin-off that season called K9 and Company with Sarah Jane Smith and the gang, but it never actually developed into a series, sadly. Anyway, coming into Tom Baker's final story is The Keeper of Traken, which introduces Anthony Ainley as the new master at the end of it, where he ends up taking over one of Tremus's body. And then finally, the marking the departure of Tom Baker after several years, Logopolis, where he actually regenerates at the end of it into the Fifth Doctor, as played by Peter Davison. Now, this is when I started seriously watching it again. And from then on, I've followed it, really. Then we have the first story of the Fifth Doctor, which unfortunately wasn't the first story that was shot. Believe it or not, it was 4 to Doomsday, which was the next one. But there you go. Not a bad story. A good sort of youthful new Doctor in the fray, trying to find his way, because obviously he's still encountering the after effects of his regeneration. And this is a good strong story, the 4 to Doomsday as well. That's a good one for Peter. And in fact, that was the very first story that he actually shot. And following on from that, a well-known classic, Kinder. That's a good one. Then you've got The Visitation, which ends up with them causing the fire of London. Black Orchid, a two-parter. And then obviously we've got the Shock Departure and Death in Earthshock, and the first appearance of the Cybermen in about 15 years in Earthshock. Following on from that, we've got Time Flight, which sees the departure of Tegan for a bit. And then obviously we've got some audios which actually just feature Nyssa and the Fifth Doctor on their own. Now I'm still collecting these, believe it or not, because I've still got about 4 or 5 still to go. First one is The Land of the Dead. Now that is a good audio to listen to, actually. It's very well done, very well put together. Next one is The Return to the Web Planet. It's a good follow-on from the original, I have to say. It's set around about, I'd say about 60 years after the events of the first one. Good story, good storyline, strong cast. I haven't listened to this one yet. This is another one I've got, Winter of the Adept. I've not listened to that one, so I can't really comment. Next on from that is the Mutant Phase, where they come up against the Daleks. Again, I've not listened to that one. Primeval. Not sure about what the story is on that one. I think I've read it out before in one of my previous things. I think it's where Nyssa is set to die at dawn and the Doctor doesn't even know why, and he's got to try and save her life for some reason. So yeah, and then following on from that, a very good story I've heard about, Spare Parts, which sets them back to the origins of the Cybermen. And then following on from that, we've got The Game. Again, I don't know what the storyline is on that. Looks good though. And another one called Creatures of Beauty. Then The Haunting of Thomas Brewster. Now this is a character who will come into the fray in the audios of Big Finish and the 6th Doctor, and I think the 7th Doctor as well later on. And The Boy That Time Forgot. I think this probably is where Thomas Brewster makes his departure from the 5th Doctor. The Reef. No, it's probably this one, because I think it's just a trilogy with Thomas Brewster in it. Castle of Fear. The Eternal Summer. What's this one? The Masquerade. Again, I don't really know about these because I haven't actually listened to them yet. Moonflesh. And Alien Heart, which they're fighting against the Daleks again. As I say, there are a few more of these to come, so I haven't got as far as that yet to finishing those. Then we move into the Arc of Infinity, where he comes up against Omega, who's trying to become fully formed, but he ends up doing it in the Doctor's sort of form, as it were, and obviously he brings back Tegan again. And then obviously we got the second experience of Lamara with Snake Dance. That's a good strong story. And then Terminus marks the departure of Nyssa. And then obviously Mordrin Undead. This is quite a good story and introduces Turlo, who is actually controlled by the Black Guardian. And if you remember, the Black Guardian were featured in the Key to Time series. Enlightenment. I think this is... Yeah, this is where the Black Guardian comes up and gets his comeuppance again. And it was the last sort of appearance of Valentin Dial before he died, because I think he passed away about a year later, bless him. And then we got the King's Demons, which was a one-off before the 25th anniversary special, The Five Doctors, which reintroduced John Pertwee and Pat Troughton, and William Hurndall played the part of the first Doctor, because obviously William Hartnell passed away in 1975, bless his heart. This was the start of Peter Davison's final series. Good, strong story. Again, featuring the Sea Devils and the Silurians. Warriors of the Deep. Frontios, which is where the TARDIS gets blown up. And you come across these characters called the Tractators. You've got The Awakening. That's a good, strong story. Where we've got a young boy, which you see there, who's actually sort of stuck between a time zone or whatever. And then obviously we've got the Resurrection of the Daleks, which marks the departure of Tegan. And that's a good, strong story. That really is a good one. You got the Chameleon Tales, which features the King's Demons, which is done. And then we got the Planet of Fire, which marks the departure of Turlo. And the appearance of his new assistant, Tegan. Oh, not Tegan, Perry. There we go. And then obviously this is the very last story featuring Peter Davison as the Fifth Doctor, the Caves of Androzani. However, Big Finish have done a set of stories with the Fifth Doctor and Perry, which I will be collecting, which lead up to the Caves of Androzani. Because I didn't think it was fair that in the original series, Perry only ended up staying with him for one story. Well, two stories, and that was it. So I thought, to extend that timeline, Big Finish have done a series where they both meet up with a little Egyptian girl called Eminem. So I'll be collecting those as well. Following on from the Fifth Doctor's regeneration into his sixth incarnation as by Colin Baker, which he has a very erratic settling from his regeneration, his traumatic regeneration. That's not a bad story. I wasn't quite enamoured with him at first in the first episode, but the second I was. Attack of the Cybermen, yeah, pretty violent, that one. Time Lash, which he comes across H.G. Wells, and this is the one where Perry ends up nearly turning into a hawk. And this was the final appearance of Pat Troughton on Doctor Who with Colin Baker in The Two Doctors. Following on to that, you've got the first appearance of Kate O'Mara as the Rani. And then you've got Vengeance on Varos. Yeah, I think this is where she ends up getting nearly turned into a hawk. Sorry, I was getting confused there. My apologies. Following on from that, and that final episode of that season was Revelation of the Daleks, where he comes up against humans being turned into Daleks, as it were. But there you go. And then obviously I've got a little sort of intermittent one via Big Finish called Year of the Pig. What that's about, I have no idea. And then Cryptobiosis, which I actually got in the other day. So I'll be collecting audios featuring the Sixth Doctor again. I did originally. Following on from that, we've got The Trial of a Time Lord. Hang on, let's get these out. The Doctor's taken out of time, and I shall sit down here and go through them. And put to trial for all of the interference he's done in nature. And he's a mysterious character called the Valeyard who's trying to get him convicted, as it were. This is the first one with him and Perry. And this is the very final one with him and Perry, where it turns out she ends up getting transformed, her brain taken out of his body into another one, and her body taken over. And as a result, Carnos has ended up having to kill her. So yeah, quite a tragic end for Perry there, or so we think. Then we've got another one which is featured on a space station, featuring his new companion, Melanie, as played by Bonnie Langford. And then finally, it turns out in this episode, because the Master makes an appearance again, that the Valiard is in fact an amalgamation of the evil sides of the Doctor between his last incarnation, his eighth incarnation, and his final incarnation. But he ends up getting his comeuppance, or so we think. So that's the end of the Trial of a Time Lord. After that, the series was put on hiatus, and sadly, they did commission a new series. But however, it turns out Colin Baker was let go, and that's when they brought in Sylvester McCoy. But what I am doing is actually featuring, I am going to be collecting all the Sixth Doctor adventures from Big Finish to extend the Sixth Doctor's timeline, because I thought that was a bit of a up in the air moment when they didn't bring him back for the regeneration. But there you go, he agreed that he wouldn't come back. However, I have got this one with featuring him and Mel in the Juggernauts, and also featuring an old classic, which you can see there from The Chase, and obviously the Daleks and Davros. Okay, right, and then obviously what we've got here, as he didn't get a proper send-off, Big Finish did do a multi-part story called The Last Adventure, featuring all of his companions that actually went with him, including Jago and Lightfoot. And obviously, the Valiard has got he's trying to get his vengeance on the Doctor by basically taking his life away from him. But he ends up where the time on Irani started, and because he ends up getting some radiation and Mel's knocked out, he ends up regenerating into his 8th persona. So there you go, his 7th persona. And talking of that, because we're coming up to 42 minutes now. I'm sorry this is a bit long-winded, but there you go. We've got Time on the Rani, which features Sylvester McCoy as the 7th incarnation of the Doctor. So yeah, that was actually Kate O'Mara's penultimate appearance. Well, actually in the show itself, it was her final appearance as the Rani. But there you go. Anyway, moving on from that. There were a set of adventures that did set mail, but I haven't got those yet. But I've ended up getting the series which actually ends up with Mel departing from the 7th Doctor, called Dragonfire. Following that, it got Ace and then in Delta and the Bannermen. That's a good strong story, remembrance of the Daleks, set back in the era. And there's a little sort of cameos to a new series starting on BBC called Doctor Who. There you go. You got the Happiness Patrol. Not sure. Silver Nemesis was quite a very good story. Battlefield was actually the start, the very final season of the original Doctor Who, featuring Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. Then you've got The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, The Curse of Fenric. That's quite a dark story, that one. Ghostlight, that's another dark story. And then obviously the very final episode of the original series of Doctor Who, Survival. Now this one here is a one-off illustrated story that came with what was his name? Yeah, it was an illustrated one. I haven't actually watched it yet, so I can't really sort of form an opinion on it. Is Richard E. Grant playing the part of the 9th Doctor? So yeah. Anyway, however, I have got some Big Finish ones here of the 7th Doctor era. This one's called Flip Flop. Now I've actually got this one is obviously with him and Mel. from what I remember, because I've had it previously, it's quite a good story. It is a multi sort of part CD. This is another one I haven't actually listened to with him and Ace, called Nightshade. This one is, I think, him and Bonnie Langford. Yeah, Unregenerate. That's a good story. Shortly after he regenerated. And these, again, I've heard not good things about his final story. It's The Fast Day. Yeah, it's all of his former enemies and companions coming together, including the end of the 12th regeneration of the Master. And then obviously this is the final part, again featuring most of his former companions, as it were. And it leads up to the actual TV movie, which I just recently bought off Vinted, featuring the newly regenerated 8th Doctor in the guise of Paul McGann. Now, I thought this story had a lot of promise, although we had a new Master in the guise of Julia Roberts' brother as the Master. Now, he's actually released a few of the Master himself on Big Finish, which I wouldn't mind getting, actually. So that would be interesting. This is just a little documentary about the anniversary of the movie, featuring the original stars as well. Anyway, however, I have started collecting some of the 8th Doctor Big Finish audio. Sorry, I'm a bit shaky here because I'm trying to hold this and do that. First one I collected is The Company of Friends, which features some of his other first companions that he comes up against. Following on from that, we've got The Four Doctors, which features the 5th, 6th, 7th, as well as the 8th incarnation of the Doctors. First one, which I've listened to previously, where he meets up with his companion. What is it? Sorry, I've lost myself. Charlie, that's it. Well, she's actually one of the crew on the R101, and he actually manages to rescue her before it crashes. So there you go. It's a very good story to listen to, I have to say. And a good start for him and Charlie's adventures. Scions of Venice, that's more like sort of based on vampires, I think. This is a good one as well. Minuet in Hell, when he comes up against Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, but he's slightly lost his memory, believe it or not. And obviously we got Invaders from Mars, which features the Ice Warriors. And this one I haven't actually listened to yet, because this is featuring his new companion, as played by Sheridan Smith. And that's his companion. Hang on, let me see. Does it actually mention them? Lucy Miller, that's it. So I've got a load of those collects as and when I get the ones with Charlie done. Anyway, the ones I have got, I managed to buy this set, Ravenous. Now, I don't know much about the genre of this one, but it's supposed to be pretty good. And I do like Paul McGann's 8th Doctor. I think it's a very good interpretation of the Doctor. But I have listened to some of the Time War series, which is obviously coming towards the end of the era of the 8th Doctor. Brilliant start on that one. 4 stories in that are good. They're good in that one. They get grittier in that one. This one I haven't actually listened to, which is virtually the finale. However, there is a little sort of spin-off, because I think, if you remember, hang on a minute, bear with me, because I'm trying to keep this. Yeah, and this is featuring the War Master, as played by Derek Jacobi, and I have to say, I think he's the evilest interpretation or manifestation of the Master that I've heard. Actually, he's very menacing, and he's very manipulative, and he has got that amiable charm that Roger Delgado had. So yeah, and they are good. I've listened to that one. Very good set of audios. including this one, which I'm about halfway through. Those two I haven't done yet. So this is the first set of the first series, and I'm going to collect the whole lot. This is another one where the 8th Doctor comes across his daughter, Susan, his granddaughter Susan, during the Time War. It also features the late William Russell as well, bless him, who sadly passed away last year, or was it the year before? And then we've got a spin-off set, which is leading up to the Night of the Doctor. You've got Cass. And then the next one is, if I can find it, we've got Reflections box set, and also Pursuit. It meets up with a new companion, because they're obviously trying to track Cass down. And this is the latest one, which I actually got through yesterday, which is released this week, Branches, where again he meets up with his granddaughter Susan. Now, this actually comes after the Night of the Doctor, featuring Tim Trelaw's interpretation of John Hurt's War Doctor. Very good. It really follows on from the Night of the Doctor. Very apt. I'm yet to listen to the rest of these. Then we've also got The War Doctor Begins, War Binger. Next one following on from that is The Battlegrounds. Then we've got Fights with Monsters, and that's the end of that first series. And then we got Comrades in Arms, and then we've got Enemy Mine, which actually is where the series ends, and he meets up with his previous incarnation. And then we've got Morbius the Mighty, which is another set of War Doctor adventures. Unknown Soldiers, all set during the Time War, and Fallen Heroes. And this is the latest one I actually got, although I'm waiting the latest release to come out. This is called Cybergene, where he actually runs into the Cybermen again, all different sort of factions of them. And then he meets up with his daughter, sorry, I got tongue tied, and a former companion as well, his granddaughter Susan. So yeah. And then we're running on to the series that John Hurt himself did, bless him, before he died, which is The War Doctor, Only the Monstrous. Brilliant. John's at his best in these. Again, the same with Infernal Devices, and obviously you've got the late Jacqueline Pearce, who does a very strong character in that one as well, as one of the Time Lords, who sends him on these missions. And Agents of Chaos, where he ends up actually meeting up with Leela. And then Casualties of War, this is the one where he ends up meeting up with Leela again, and it ends up in a really good finale as well. And this one is actually read by Nicholas Briggs, who interprets a very good version of John Hurt's War Doctor as well, which leads up to his it leads up to the moment, as it were, where he ends up having to blow his own planet up to stop the war. And this is a feature of audios which celebrated the 60th anniversary by Big Finish of Doctor Who. Oh, sorry, shaky handwork again. This is where you've got a mortally wounded War Doctor who's retrieved, and he keeps regenerating, but it's degenerating. He keeps regenerating into all his past lives for some reason, and somebody or someone is behind it. The first one is where he actually regenerates into his 4th incarnation, called Once and Future Past Lives, featuring Tom Baker. And believe it or not, the one who's playing the part of Sarah Jane Smith is actually Liz Sladen's daughter. Would you believe it? And I think he comes across the Time Meddler as featured here. So there you go. The next one is The Artists of Time, where he regenerates back into his 5th incarnation and meets up with his daughter again. And then we've got the next one is where he regenerates into his 7th persona. Meets up with Davros again. We've got another one where he goes back to his 6th incarnation and meets up with Harry Sullivan and obviously Cassandra, as well as Rose's mum. So there you go. Then it's oh sorry, I've just jumped the gun there a bit because I've got that in the wrong sequence. Right, the next one featuring the next incarnation, which is his 10th. He goes into his 9th incarnation, and his other alter ego self on a different timeline. Meets up with two of his former assistants, called Time Lord Immemorial. And then he regenerates back into his 8th incarnation, as well as his 4th incarnation, meets up with his granddaughter and River Song. Then you've got the 10th Doctor. He goes back into, meets up with Missy and some of the gang, I think the Paternoster gang. And then finally he goes back to his normal War Doctor self and meets up with Queen Elizabeth I and Benny, and obviously you've got the Fugitive Doctor, which we don't know is before his 1st incarnation. And that obviously results eventually in the regeneration of himself into his 9th persona. Now, this one I haven't listened to. I've been collecting these when they were reissued. These are all set before he meets up with Rose, so it sort of extended the 9th Doctor's timeline. So we've got Ravagers. We've got Respond to All Calls. From what I've heard, they're pretty good. Old Friends, where he meets up with Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart again. A retired Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. And then he meets up with the Cybermen in Lost Warriors. And then it's back to Earth. Into the Stars. Hidden Depths. There you go, he meets up with 2 former companions. Also, we got Shades of Fear. Pioneers. Travel of Hope. And then you've got Buried Threats, where he meets up with Benny again. And then the final one, Starcross, where he meets up with River Song again. And then that leads into where he meets up with Rose. The series, the new series. Rose and the End of the World, where Earth ends up getting destroyed. Then you've got Unquiet Dead and Aliens of London. Obviously. And that's obviously World War III. Mary meets up with Winston Churchill. Oh no, it's not. He meets up with the Daleks, I think. And Dalek, there we go. And then obviously you've got The Long Game and Father's Day, where Rose ends up meeting up with her father, who she never really knew. But following on from that, Big Finish have done a series of audios over the last 6 months or so, starting with Snare, which actually are featured mainly on the housing estate him and his mum live. Her and his mum, Rose's mum, live. So we got Snare, Last Days of the Powell Estate, Cloud 8, and Dare You, and Pandemonium, which is the latest release. So yeah, all from what I've read, they're all good stories. So it sort of extends the 9th Doctor's timeline again, which is good. So I'm trying to get these all back into order again, but I'll sort that out a little bit later. And then going back into the series itself, we've obviously got The Empty Child. Now that's a good story, actually. Very strong story. The Doctor Dances, that's a good one as well. And then obviously Boomtown, where he meets up with the you-know-who. She's going out the window, isn't she? And then obviously you've got Bad Wolf, which is the start of the final adventure of the 9th Doctor. You got Parting of the Ways, where he meets up with the Daleks, and then ends up regenerating into his 10th persona, which leads on to a very good introduction for David Tennant as the 10th Doctor in the Christmas Invasion. Now, leading on from that, you got two very strong stories: New Earth, New Doctor, you know, where he meets up with Cassandra again, and you got Tooth and Claw, where they try and save Queen Victoria from a werewolf. There you go. Obviously, from that, you got School Reunion, where he meets up with Sarah Jane Smith again, and K9, believe it or not, that's one of my favourite episodes. And then following on from that, you got The Girl in the Fireplace. I love that story. Such a sad ending at the end. Anyway, you got The Rise of the Cybermen, how he goes into an alternate universe where he meets up with her dad again, etc. And The Age of Steel. And then on from that, you got The Idiot's Lantern and The Impossible Planet. Now that's a good one as well. You got The Satan Pit. That's a very strong story as well. And it just expresses his love for Rose. And then you got Love and the Monsters, which is a sort of a spin-off in a way. And then following that, you got Fear Her and The Army of Ghosts, parts 1 and 2. So there you go, we meet up with the Cybermen again. And then I think we've got in between that, we've got the Big Finish audio 10th Doctor's Adventures Volume 2, because obviously it's around the era of him and Rose and the Powell Estate, etc. This is one special episode. This is Volume 2 of the 10th Doctor Adventures that David Tennant first did. So there you go. Anyway, following on from that, you've got the Doomsday and Runaway Bride. That's a good story. Doomsday obviously is where Rose ends up in a different timeline from the Doctor, and they're both separated. And then following on from that is the Christmas special, The Runaway Bride, where he meets up with Donna. Oh, that is I mean, that must admit, I have to say, the chemistry between him and Catherine. Oh, wow. And then following on from that, you got Smith and Jones, where we first encounter these guys, and Shakespeare's Code. Now that's a good one as well. This was a one-off illustrated story called The Infinite Quest. Now I've not actually watched this, so I can't really tell you what it's about. Then following on from that, we've got another Big Finish, 10th Doctor's Adventures with Donna, etc. Volume 1, which is well within the timeline. And then going on from that, you got Gridlock. Actually, I should have put that. No, that's in the wrong order. Sorry. Don't know how I got that wrong, but there you go. Following on from that, you've got Gridlock, which brings back the Mara or whatever they were. And then you've got the Daleks Infinity, Part 1. The Evolution of the Daleks. Oh, that's a good story. And then Lazarus's Experiment, which I think... yeah, I'm not sure what... Oh, yeah, I do know that one. Martha ends up nearly getting sacrificed. 42, and then you got Human Nature. That's a good story. Where he ends up going into his alter ego, John Smith. Because he's escaping, he's gone... His own persona's been put into a sort of a golden fob watch, as it were. Right, following on from that, I got the first series of Torchwood. Again, I've not seen them on, so I can't really comment. And then obviously we've got another set of 10th Doctor's Adventures featuring Donna, etc. But I am going to put that a little bit later because I've got that cocked up. Sorry. Yeah, I'm not going to mention that. I'll mention that in a minute. So then the next story on from that is The Family of Blood. That's a good one. Blink, I love that one. That's the first time we see the Weeping Angels. Excellent story. And then we've got Utopia and the Sound of the Drums, which features the Master. And that's when Martha goes on her years of travel around the world, which Big Finish have done, and I have actually seen it on Vinted, and I'd love to get hold of it. Coming back, we've got The Last of the Time Lords, and that marks the departure of Martha. And then there was a sort of a one-off Children in Need special where he meets up with his fifth persona. But following on from that, you've got The Voyage of the Damned, when he ends up on a space version of the Titanic. I don't know if anybody remembers that one. And then obviously, following on from that, you've got Partners in Crime, where he gets reunited with Donna and the Adipose. And then you've got The Fires of Pompeii. That's a damn good story as well. And then I think we're coming into this, which is the 10th Doctor Adventures Volume 3. You've got 3 audios featuring all the gang there, including Wilf and his mother and Donna's mum, as well as Donna and the Doctor. So, yeah, I think I'll put that one there. Right. Following on from that, Planet of the Ood. That's a good story as well. Then you got the Sontaran Stratagem. Yeah, actually no, we'll put that there, and that goes with that. That would make it a sensible timeline. So there you go. Sorry, I'm waffling on here. Following on from that, you got The Poison Sky and the Doctor's daughter, where he meets up with his daughter. She ends up getting tragically killed, but ends up regenerating and goes on her own adventures. So, and Big Finish have done audios of that as well. Following on from that, we've got The Unicorn and the Wasp. That's a good story. Featuring mentioning the disappearance of Agatha Christie for a while. Silence in the Library. Now, that is one of my favourites, where he ends up encountering River Song for the first time. Oh, I'm going to move this book out of the way. And then obviously we've got Turn Left, where Donna meets up with Rose, who's been trying to get to the Doctor. And then you've got Stolen Earth, which features all the companions of his era and his last time with Sarah Jane Smith. And then obviously we've got Dreamland. Now that is a good story, actually. That follows on with the Doctor being on his own. And then obviously you've got the departure of Donna as well, because he has to wipe her mind, otherwise she'll end up dying, as it were. Anyway, we've got the complete last specials, which obviously, if you remember, are, if I can get the actual thing out of its cover. Yeah, this isn't easy because I'm going to have to take this out the cover. Sorry, guys. We have the Easter. Oh yeah, we had The Next Doctor. That's a good strong story. Where this guy thinks he's the Doctor, and it turns out he's just been sort of had his memory wipes, as it were, when he got one of these things that had an imprint of the Doctor's history on it. That was the Easter special, where a bus goes into a different timeline and he meets up with Cassandra, but he doesn't take her on board because he says, I've lost too many people. So there you go. Then you've got The Waters of Mars, where he tries to basically save all the crew that ended up getting killed, but she ends up taking her own life. And then finally, you've got the 2 parts of the Christmas special, where he ends up travelling with Wilf, because Donna's obviously out of mind wipe, and they're trying to keep out of the way of Donna, and then he ends up foiling the Time Lord's plans, because they're trying to get Gallifrey back into existence, as it were, because it was frozen in the Time War, in his War Master guise, as it were. And it ends up with the 10th Doctor not really reluctantly regenerating into his 11th persona. So there you go. Right, so that's that. Sorry about that, guys. I know it's a pain, but there you are. It is what it is, and I am trying to get that back into its box, and that's not easy with one hand. Anyway, I'll put that one up there because that's another featuring Donna and him. So we get on to The Next Doctor, which is The Matt Smith era. Introducing Matt Smith in the 11th hour, having regenerated. He adjusts to his new persona pretty well. And then you've got The Beast Below, which features the Silurians, etc. Victory of the Daleks. That's a good story. That's where he meets up with Churchill. Time of the Angels meets up with the Whisper. Well, you know the ones. Then you got The Flesh and Stone, Vampires of Venice. That's a good strong episode. Amy's Choice, The Hungry Earth, Cold Blood, Vincent and the Doctor. Now that is a favourite of mine, I have to say. You got The Lodger. That's a good one. Pandorica Opens and The Big Bang. So that sort of rounds everything up, as it were. Then we had the Christmas special. Oh no, it wasn't that one, it was another one. Where is it? I think it's included in this one. Which ended up with that song. I've forgotten what it was called. Hang on, let's just see what we've got. Yeah, it was The Christmas Carol. That was a lovely, lovely story, that one. And then obviously you've got The Impossible Astronaut. That's a good story with River Song and all that. I think he's dead, but he ends up turning up, and it's all good reason. Day of the Moon, which is actually where he's fighting the silence, and The Curse of the Black Spot. Yeah, that's a good one. Obviously you got The Doctor's Wife, which is there. He ends up forming the character of the TARDIS into a woman. But her body cannot the body cannot hold it for long, obviously, because they're fighting against the demon thing that's possessed the TARDIS, and they end up winning. The Rebel Flesh, which is that one there, where people are replicated. Then you've got Almost People. I don't remember what that one was about, but there you go. The Good Man Goes to War. Now that is a very good story. And then obviously Let's Kill Hitler is where they meet up with River Song, because their daughter ends up regenerating to River Song, which is where it all starts for River Song. You've got Night Terrors and then The Girl Who Waited. That's a good story too. Then we've got The Ood Complex. I don't remember that one. Closing Time and The Wedding of River Song, which sews up the series, I think, on that one as well. Or am I wrong? No, I don't think I am. Then we've got The Doctor Who Confidential, all the follow-ups on that. Because obviously we're doing Doctor Who Confidentials, obviously when the new series started. Which was a behind-the-scenes look at Doctor Who, as it were. Now I'm trying to get this back into its box set. It's not easy when you've got one hand. Right. Then we've got the Christmas special, which is Doctor Who, The Widow and the Wardrobe.